Ever wonder about the truths behind those common survival myths? We're about to journey into a world where not everything is as it seems. You see, some survival tips that have been handed down through generations or glamorized on TV can actually be dangerous, yes, even life-threatening. So it's high time we separate fact from fiction and debunk these survival myths, because knowing the truth could one day save your life. Prepare to have your survival knowledge challenged as we debunk some common myths. Let's start by debunking the myth about eating snow for hydration. Many of us have heard this one before. It seems logical, right? Snow is just frozen water, so it should hydrate us. But the reality is not so straightforward. Eating snow can indeed lower your body temperature, which can lead to hypothermia. It's a much safer bet to melt the snow before drinking it. That way, you can avoid a sudden drop in body temperature and stay safe in cold conditions. Moving on to the next myth, the idea that moss only grows on the north side of trees. This is a common belief, often used as a method of navigation in the wilderness. The truth, however, is that moss can grow on all sides of a tree, depending on environmental conditions like moisture and sunlight. So, relying on moss for directions could lead you astray. It's always better to use a compass or other reliable navigation tools when you're out in the wild. Now let's tackle a potentially dangerous myth, the belief that you can suck venom out of a snake bite. It seems like a quick fix, something you've likely seen in a movie or read in an adventure novel. But in reality, trying to suck out venom can actually spread it and introduce bacteria to the wound. It's far better to keep the wound clean and seek medical help as soon as possible. Remember, a snake bite is a serious medical emergency that requires professional attention. So those are the first 3 myths debunked. Let's move on to the next ones. Here's another myth: drinking alcohol keeps you warm. Now this one is a little tricky. While it's true that consuming alcohol can produce a temporary sensation of warmth, it actually lowers your core body temperature. This is because alcohol causes blood vessels to expand, which allows more blood to flow to the skin surface. This gives you a fleeting feeling of heat, but simultaneously causes your body to lose heat faster. So in a survival situation, that bottle of whiskey might not be your best friend. Moving on, let's talk about food. Many people believe that finding food should be your first priority in a survival situation. However, this is not exactly correct. Your body can survive for weeks without food, but only a few days without water. And in harsh conditions, maintaining body temperature and finding shelter are far more important than filling your belly. So remember, food is essential, but it's not the immediate priority. Another common myth is that if you're lost, you should immediately start walking to find help. While this might seem logical, it's not always the best course of action. If you're unsure of your surroundings or direction, wandering aimlessly can lead you further into danger. It's often better to stay put, make yourself visible, and wait for help. Of course, this isn't a one-size-fits-all rule. If you know exactly where you're going, moving might be the right choice, but if in doubt, it's safer to stay put. It's fascinating how many survival myths are out there and how many of them have been passed down through generations. But as we've seen, not every piece of advice is sage and sound. It's critical to separate fact from fiction, especially when it comes to survival situations. So stay tuned, because we're not done just yet. As you can see, not everything you hear about survival is true. Let's debunk more myths. Ever thought survival shows taught you everything? Think again. Now, there's a common myth that survival shows are a reliable source of survival techniques. While they can be entertaining and even educational at times, the truth is, many of these shows are designed more for entertainment than practical survival. They might show you how to build a makeshift raft out of palm leaves, but the reality of survival is often far less glamorous and far more about making smart, practical decisions. Next, let's talk about cacti. There's a persistent myth out there that cacti are a reliable source of water in the desert. The truth, however, is that most cacti contain fluids that are not safe to drink. In fact, they can cause vomiting and further dehydration. So if you find yourself lost in the desert, don't start hacking into the nearest cactus. Now, on to bears. One myth that's been circulating for years is that bears can't run downhill. This is completely false. Bears are incredibly agile creatures that can run downhill very quickly. Trying to outrun a bear on a downhill slope is a decision that could very well end in disaster. And speaking of bears, another myth is that playing dead is the best course of action when you encounter one. The truth is, this really depends on the type of bear and the situation. Playing dead might work with a mother grizzly defending her cubs, but it could be a fatal mistake with a black bear. Each bear encounter is unique and requires a different approach. So there you have it. Survival shows aren't always the best source of practical survival techniques. Cacti aren't the desert water fountains they're often made out to be. Bears can and do run downhill, and playing dead isn't always the best strategy when you come face to face with a bear. We've debunked more myths, but we're not done yet. Stay tuned for more reality checks on common survival misconceptions. Let's tackle some myths about shelter, water, and frostbite. First, let's address a common misconception about survival shelters. The myth is that lean-to shelters are the best survival shelters. But the truth is, the best shelter depends on the environment, weather, and available materials. A lean-to may offer little insulation or protection from the elements in certain conditions. Next, let's debunk some water-related myths. You might have heard that you can survive a week without water. The truth is, the average person can only survive 3 to 5 days without water, depending on conditions. And what about eating snow and ice as a hydration source? Well, consuming snow and ice can lower your core temperature and lead to dehydration, as it requires energy for your body to melt them, so it's best to melt snow and ice before drinking. Now, boiling water. It's a common belief that boiling water makes it safe to drink. While boiling does kill pathogens, it doesn't remove chemical contaminants or heavy metals from water. So it's not a foolproof method for making water safe to drink. Moving on to frostbite, there's a myth that you should rub frostbitten skin to warm it up. However, rubbing frostbitten skin can cause tissue damage. It's better to slowly warm the area using body heat or warm water. Lastly, let's talk about a survival strategy that's more harmful than helpful: drinking urine. The myth is that drinking urine can help you survive without water. But the truth is, urine contains waste products and can be harmful to drink, especially as it becomes more concentrated. So, in a survival situation, it's important to prioritize shelter, water, and maintaining body temperature over finding food. And remember, it's often better to stay put and make yourself visible to rescuers unless you know exactly where you're going. We're nearing the end, but there's more. Let's address the last set of myths. This one is for all you nature enthusiasts. The myth that all brightly colored insects and plants are poisonous is simply not true. Yes, some creatures and plants use bright colors as a warning signal, but this isn't a universal rule. Many brightly colored organisms are completely harmless, so don't be too quick to judge a book by its cover. Now on to the next myth. Building a fire inside a cave is a good way to stay warm. This is a dangerous misconception. Yes, a fire can provide warmth, but in a cave it can also lead to suffocation from smoke or even carbon monoxide poisoning. It's essential to ensure proper ventilation if you're considering using a fire for heat. And that wraps up our debunking session. Remember, knowledge is power, especially when it comes to survival, and myths can sometimes be the difference between life and death. We've covered a lot of ground today, debunking common survival myths. From the dangers of eating snow for hydration to the myth about moss only growing on the north side of trees. We've learned that sucking venom from a snake bite can do more harm than good, and that alcohol won't really keep you warm. We've also debunked myths about survival priorities, navigating when lost, and misconceptions from survival shows. Remember, when it comes to survival, knowledge is power. Make sure yours is accurate. Stay safe out there.